Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to completely challenge everything you think you know about risk and compliance to uncover why perfectly designed systems still manage to crash. We're going to completely rethink what it actually means to be resilient. Okay, so let's just dive right into this. Have you ever seen a system that passed every single test, met literally all the requirements, but somehow still failed out in the real world? As IT and ops professionals, we rely so heavily on green dashboards and completed audits to make us feel safe. I mean, we love checking those boxes, right? We love the comfort of a dashboard full of green lights, even when our gut instinct is telling us something is way off. Like staring at a perfectly clean compliance report while the servers are literally on fire.
But what if all that confidence is just built on a dangerous illusion? There is a massive gap between what's being reported on your pristine screen and the chaotic, messy reality that's churning right beneath the surface. We really have to ask ourselves, are we just giving ourselves a false sense of security while completely ignoring what's actually happening?
To figure this out, we're actually going to be using some groundbreaking materials today from the DVMS Institute, specifically their Assuring Resilience Fundamentals. We're going to use this to completely shift how you observe, measure, and protect your incredibly complex digital environments. And don't worry, this isn't about throwing away your current tools. It's just about changing how you view them. Which brings us to a really harsh truth. Green does not mean safe. We have to realize that metrics, they only reflect arbitrary thresholds. Sure, they show us what is expected to happen, but they absolutely do not capture the actual, dynamic, minute-by-minute conditions of your interconnected networks. Look, our traditional models are actually great at verifying design and tracking known risks. They do that well, but they assume a predictable linear cause and effect. Out in the wild, though, these tools completely miss the chaotic reality of system dynamics and emergent behaviors. They miss how components violently interact with each other when put under real stress. And that leads us to this honestly terrifying reality. Everything can function correctly, and the system can still fail. Even when every single component works perfectly on its own in isolation, unexpected emergent behavior can cause a catastrophic failure during peak demand. Think about a tiny, minor background software update that somehow cascades into a total network outage. A system is just so much more than the sum of its parts. So to combat this, we need a massive paradigm shift. We have to move away from blindly trusting our control documentation and move toward actively observing system behavior. Think about it for a second. Control just validates the assumptions we already made. But observation reveals reality. Let's get really clear on what we actually mean by observation here. True observation means revealing actual system behavior through emerging signals rather than just enforcing expected limits. It basically means looking at how your system naturally adapts under pressure because, at the end of the day, you simply cannot assure what you cannot see. But here is the catch, right? You literally can't observe everything. To avoid just drowning in a sea of alert noise, we have to stop trying to measure every little thing. Instead, we need to strictly define the operational boundaries that absolutely must not be violated. You need to ask your team what absolutely cannot fail. Doing this gives your observation real focus and actual purpose. Now, to define those boundaries, you need evidence. But I'm not talking about a finalized PDF report or some audit checklist. Genuine evidence is the observable system behavior connected to specific conditions. It's the actual, tangible proof of exactly how your system performs out there in the real world. Because, let's be real, there's this constant battle going on between the comforting corporate narrative that tells us everything is stable and the hard evidence of what the signals actually show. When that fairy tale narrative conflicts with the shattering reality of degrading system signals, you must always trust the evidence. No exceptions. So, what does real confidence actually look like out in the wild? Well, it definitely isn't a stubborn declaration of safety. True confidence is grounded in observable evidence. It actively acknowledges uncertainty, it openly considers contradictory signals, and crucially, it's subject to change as conditions evolve. It's a dynamic judgment, not just a static fact on a page. Which leads to a really tough question that you honestly need to ask yourself today. What evidence would actually change your mind? Because if your confidence cannot be shifted by new, contradictory signals, then you aren't actually practicing assurance. You're really just holding on to an assumption. But gathering all this evidence brings up another harsh reality. Insight without action has no value. Waiting around for absolute certainty before making a decision simply guarantees that your intervention is going to be way too late.
Assurance that doesn't trigger a swift action is honestly just reporting. Remember, not acting, that is absolutely still a decision. In dynamic systems, timing is everything. Decisions must be triggered by shifting conditions and early signals. They cannot be delayed by scheduled monthly reporting cycles. I mean, if you wait for the quarterly risk review, your system might already be down. To make all of this incredibly practical, we use something called the assurance learning loop. And it's not a static process, it's a living engine. Every single action you take feeds right back into this continuous loop, where the outcomes of your decisions become the fresh evidence you need to refine your understanding. It is, quite literally, how your organization gets smarter over time.
We also really have to stop confusing resolution with actual learning. Simply resolving an incident, putting out the immediate fire, without actually understanding the core signals, practically guarantees that the exact same failure will repeat itself in the future. Resolution puts out the fire. Learning fireproofs the building.
Okay, so how do you actually start applying this today? Well, you don't need to throw away your existing frameworks. Instead, just start with these meaningful first steps. Expand your visibility into system interactions. Shift your internal conversations. Start asking what is actually happening instead of just are we compliant. Act on those early variability signals and start treating every single outcome as a genuine learning opportunity. I want to leave you with one final, kind of provocative thought here. The next time your dashboard shows a nice, comfortable green status, ask yourself, are you actually managing your system, or are you just managing the report? What could you potentially be missing, and what hard evidence do you actually have to prove that everything is safe? It's time to challenge the illusion and start looking at the reality. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Catch you next time.